Welcome to a special series designed by Global Farmer Network. Hello, I'm Delaney Howell, and over the next few months, I'll be talking to farmers all around the globe regarding some very important topics. Today's discussion takes us to the western city of Manjimup, Australia, where we're joined by GFN member Jake Ryan. Jake, thank you so much for joining today. Certainly appreciate your time.
No, thank you very much for having me. It's an absolute honor.
So, Jake, you are there in Western Australia. For those of our viewers who are not aware of the agricultural production that goes on in that part of Australia, tell us a little bit more about what that landscape looks like.
Yep, so I'm from the southwest of Western Australia, so right down the bottom corner of Western Australia. So we're what we classify as a high rainfall zone and a Mediterranean climate. So we got wet, cold winters and hot, dry summers. So in my area, we're horticulture based. So there's a lot of orchards, vegetable farms, and so it's very heavily horticultural dominated. So, but there's also a fair bit of livestock. So it's quite a mixed sort of area. Whereas if you go further east, you go out to the wheat belt, which I'm sure a lot of listeners have probably heard of. And then you go a little bit further out, you're into desert and station country.
Is a little different landscape maybe than some other folks farm or see in their neck of the woods. But Three Ryan's Farm is the name of your farm there in Western Australia, Southwestern Australia. What do you guys farm? What do you grow?
Yep, so we're pretty diverse in what we do. So like I was saying, we're a horticulture-based business. So vegetables are our main source of income. So we grow cabbages, so red and white cabbage, cauliflower, broccoli, green kale, and red kale. So our growing season is from November through till May, so through our summer. And then during the winter months, it goes towards more the metropolitan areas like Perth and the surrounding areas around there. So during the summer months, we will supply about 80% of Western Australia's cabbage, mainly for processing. We also grow cauliflowers and broccoli for processing and a little bit for the fresh market. And the cauliflowers are just going to start getting exported to Singapore this year, which will be interesting to see how it goes. We also have a fairly diverse livestock enterprise. So we run 1,000 ewes, 40 cows, and 4,000 pasture-raised laying hens. So it keeps us busy.
Yeah, no kidding. I don't know how you have any free time to do all the other things you do because you guys are pretty busy on the farm, and we're going to get to that here in a little bit, talking about agritourism. But we had the pleasure of meeting in Frankfurt at one of the regional roundtable events. And I remember you mentioning to me that you're doing all of these different produce opportunities, but you're also kind of creating a new product with your produce, cauliflower rice. What the heck is that?
Yes, so if anyone knows cauliflowers, you know that your yields in cauliflowers are quite low. So because cauliflowers are white, they show every single blemish, every bruise, every grub mark, any bit of damage. Having that white head, they really show a lot of, I suppose, imperfections. And the market we supply is pretty high end. We charge a premium for our products. So what they want is a perfectly white head with no, I suppose, imperfections on it. So that leaves us with a fair bit of waste. So this waste product, instead of leaving the paddock, we decided to do something with it. So we developed a cauliflower rice product. So it's 100% cauliflower. We get cauliflower and we blend it and we bag it off, and we use it as a rice substitute. So we buy the bags and I chase that low carb, low fat sort of substitute to rice. They can replace it with this product, and it seems to be going quite well. So demand for it keeps increasing, and we're actually going to start exporting that to Singapore as well. So it's, quite exciting. It's a good way to reduce waste.
Yeah, it's crazy. In the grocery store, sometimes you'll see produce or cans or things that are flawed or impure and goes for a discount, obviously. So it's It's super neat to see that you guys have been able to think through and figure out a way to take advantage of that opportunity. But you're mentioning the export market to Singapore, where you guys have created a new business or an opportunity to get out of Australia. How did you go about doing that? And what does that relationship look like with Singapore?
Yeah, so it's quite a new one. We started last year. So exporting to Singapore and Malaysia isn't new for us. So we used to, management my area was mainly a cauliflower growing area. So back in the day, there would have been probably 80 to 90 cauliflower growers in our area. And they were all, and the cauliflower market was just about 100% export, go into Singapore and Malaysia. And about the mid 90s there, when the Australian dollar increased and a few other external factors, I think China came into the market and a few other areas started supplying cauliflowers to Singapore and Malaysia, we lost the market. So overnight, overnight Aussie dollar got to a point where it wasn't affordable for them. They could find cheaper product elsewhere. So we lost that market overnight. So a lot of veggie farmers or cauliflower growers moved to things like potatoes, avocados, apple orchards, other I suppose, streams. And we stayed in it and we, I suppose, took up the domestic market. So, and over the years, we've been growing different vegetables to supply the local market. So recently, was it maybe 2 years ago, we were approached by a company called Naturally Nurtured. So the company was chasing regeneratively grown vegetables, which I suppose a little bit harder to come by. It's a pretty new sort of concept in Western Australia, the whole regen ag in horticulture. In terms of broadacre, a fair few growers are adopting regen practices, the holistic grazing and no-till. I think no-till's been big here for years. So we were approached by this company to start exporting. So what this company does is they DNA test our cauliflowers so they can trace it back to our farm. And they do nutrient density testing. So they're testing for minerals and vitamins so that they can publish it on the labels so the consumer who is buying it can actually see what's in it and where it comes from. So, and there's a certain standard that's got to be met. So I've got certain levels I have to reach in terms of minerals and vitamins. So we passed all that, and then chemical residues. They are chasing pretty much undetectable levels. So with the practices that we've implemented on our farm, which means that our produce shows undetectable levels of any chemical residue, which for, well, I suppose conventionally grown vegetables, it's pretty uncommon. So we hit that market and so we're going to start supplying maybe 50% of what we grow now was going to be exported to Singapore. So exciting times.
Wow, that 50% of your production is a large quantity that you're going to be exporting elsewhere. Did you feel like that decision to start partnering with Singapore and other companies, was that more out of necessity or was it consumer driven, or how did you guys make that move in the first place?
They offered us a pretty nice price, and we've worked with this company for the last 12 months, 18 months. So we've sort of built a relationship, and I suppose we know they're going to pay. I think that's always the worry with export, is that it's obviously going to a different country and it's hard to follow up on payment. At the end of the day, that's what it's about. Can pay for your goods. So, and they're quite a nice company. They pay us on time. So, yeah, we feel comfortable with supplying a bit more of our produce and taking, I suppose, we're not supplying less to the local market. We just increase what we're growing. Because Perth, for West Australia's population, is so small, I think we're 2 million, 3 million across the whole state. There's only so much you can grow to supply that market until you fill it. So if we want to expand exports, pretty much our main option.
Now, you mentioned something interesting there. You said that Western Perth or Western Australia only is about 2 or 3 million people population-wise. So obviously you grew up there, you went to university, and you decided to come back to that area that maybe didn't have as many opportunities as the eastern side, where, of course, Sydney and Melbourne and all of those cities are located. Was it ever a thought for you or a conversation, or did you always know that you were going back to the farm?
No, farming has been, I suppose, is in my blood. I love farming, so it was always going to be I suppose, the end goal to come back to the farm. So yeah, I went to university in 2013. I studied agribusiness at Curtin. Did my 4 years there, and then I graduated. The original plan was I was going to take an off-farm job, go consulting, or do some agronomy for 5 years, work for someone else, and I suppose expand on what I knew. I suppose my education. But while I was doing that, while I was in the process of graduating from uni, my dad and my uncle at the time were farming together. And I suppose they decided to go on separate paths. My dad wanted to go down the veggies. My uncle was more interested in livestock. So they split the farm up. And Dad asked me if I was interested in coming back to the farm. And I suppose I jumped at the opportunity to come back and go farming. So straight after university, instead of going off taking an off-farm job, I jumped on the bandwagon and went back farming. So it was great.
So, Three Ryan's Farms, that's a multi-generational farm name. And there's a little bit of a backstory behind that name. Tell us more about it.
Yep. So my great granddad was the local doctor in town. So he was in Northcliffe, which is the town that neighbours Manjimup. So he had 3 sons. So they went off to boarding school, and when they returned to town, they'll probably cause a little bit of trouble around town and giving my great granddad a bit of a headache. So he bought a block of bush. This would have been back in the 1950s, 1940s, 1950s. Bought him a block of bush and said, if you clear it, you can farm it. So my granddad and his 2 brothers cleared the farm and fenced it, and I started off doing dairy and potatoes and whatnot. Then they all had kids, so they split up. So my granddad had 3 sons, and then for a while there, they all farmed together, and then they all split up and went their separate ways. And now it's myself, my mum, and my dad. So the three of us farm it. So hence 3 Ryans.
That's neat, though, that it's always been kind of 3 Ryans running the family farm. And it's interesting how it's worked out just that way. It's like they planned it almost.
Yeah, so it's worked out quite well. And I think, it's a nice number of family members to have on the farm. I think when it would have been 3 of them plus all their kids, it would have been like 20 kids running around the farm. It probably would have got a bit much. So, and there's obviously not enough land and everyone's got the different ideas. So you got, I suppose, split off and I suppose focus on a few ideas, and it works out well like that.
In part 2 of our series, catch Jake discussing challenges he sees in multi-generational farming and agriculture as a whole.